apologies to Craig, who saw some of this at RSA, but I'm not going to do it at the same pace. I did a talk called War Games. This one's called the Volt because we have 12 to 18 months left. But I am going to at least kind of describe what I said to RSA, because you guys are the choir a little bit. So similar images, but I want to see if any of this sticks for our happy hour later. So my name is Joshua. If you saw War Games, it's the name of the computer. Shall we play a game? And I was really trying to say, instead of playing games like checkers and chess, let's have a few different games for the audience. RSA is the largest conference in the world for cybersecurity, fairly corporate focused. So I kind of said, let's prioritize things. What's more important, PCI data or protected health information? Somebody shout something out quick. PHI, okay. What's more important, intellectual property or PHI? What's more important, medical records or medical records? Oh, read the fine print. Confidentiality or availability? We have laws on HIPAA for 20 years. We don't have any laws on availability. What's more important, your wallet or your life? The needs of the many or the needs of the one? So we took everyone's answers. You're getting like the backstage tour, not the actual normal speed. And everybody intuitively realized your credit card is the least important asset. And everybody intuitively understood that if you don't have timely access to patient care, you can't get your chemotherapy, you can't get your blood type in the ER. Everybody understood this when you or your family. Of course, the most important stuff's at the bottom of Maslow's pyramid. And then I said, so why has the RSA done the exact opposite prioritization for the last 30 years? And why are you here for your employer, but not your family and your community? And I wasn't being a jerk about it. I just wanted to cause some cognitive dissonance. And I pushed pretty hard, and then I stopped. I'm like, don't worry, it's not all your fault. We'll come back to that. Okay, so then I said, let's play game number 2. Let's not do it for assets, but for functions. CISA has the 16 critical infrastructure sectors, 55 functions like provide drinking water, et cetera. So the 16 columns aren't useful to me. There's public-private partnerships for each, but they're too wide and too diverse. So it's these 55 national critical functions that matter a little bit more. Bob Kalowski coined them. I don't love all of them, but they're better. They're like provide drinking water, provide electricity. But back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, could you maybe stratify and say which ones are at the bottom, like food, shelter, safety, the things that if you don't have them for 48 hours, it's the Lord of the Flies, riots, looting, civil unrest, Rodney King riots, or maybe the hurricane in Puerto Rico. Like, we know we don't have a whole lot of social cohesion after 48 hours, right? So we'll come back to that. Back to the idea of your wallet or your life. I hope you'd all say your life's more important, right? So what's more important? Support banking, which is one of those critical functions, which is great for the economy, or provide fuel for the Eastern Seaboard. Provide electricity. These are going to get harder, by the way, or provide food. Provide water or provide food. You can go 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 days without water, 30 days without food. I couldn't make 30 days. All right, what's more important, provide water or provide medical care? It is a trick question. You cheated. What's more important, protecting the confidentiality of your HIPAA data, PHI, or providing life-saving treatment? Well, HIPAA kills people, folks. We don't get the priorities right. So I'm going to skip this one because I said it earlier, but the time is brain idea. So CISA, and when I was working at CISA, we published the first statistical proof of loss of life. We did qualitative and quantitative analysis of ransomware affected communities had excess deaths 2, 4, and 6 weeks later, and we could do data science and publish it. The CDC Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. On the same day we published this, well, here was some of the qualitative analysis. You saw a video. Actually, you didn't see it. I didn't play it yet. I'm going to skip this. There's 2 ways people die during a ransom, both the ones who can't get timely access to care and the overflow blast radius. On the same day we published our data science, the front page of the Wall Street Journal published the death of a baby in Alabama that was going through the courts, where a ransomed hospital kept admitting patients at the same rate they would admit without the ransom, and due to lack of access to imaging and other remote telemetry devices, while the baby had an umbilical cord wrapped around their neck and was dangerously but successfully delivered, the baby subsequently died. And the NICU didn't have a dozen or so devices that could help assist in the care delivery. So you had a named victim and a statistical proof on the same day. which motivated Congress to ignore a lot of lobbying dollars and pass the Patch Act into law later that year, requiring medical device minimum cyber hygienes. My fellow co-founders in CyberMed Summit, Dr. Christian Nemeth and Dr. Jeff Tully with some colleagues, they said, you know what? You don't even have to have your hospital ransomed to hurt people. They showed what they call the blast radius, where Scripps Institute in San Diego got hit, and everyone that absorbed the overflow with increased wait times, worsened outcomes, had quantifiable harms. So it's a regional systems view. I was really focused on all this stuff with Robin Kelly, and then all of a sudden, Robin Kelly, that was the woman who just gave, the congresswoman who just gave the virtual remarks, we were so focused on how many people died during the 4 to 6 weeks you're down. We didn't realize that Becker's has a study, Becker's looks at all the hospitals. Most small, medium rural hospitals have 4 to 6 weeks of their cash flow burn rate on hand. So they can take 4 to 6 weeks without completely running out of money. So what we didn't realize is in the 1,000 hospitals that have closed since 2015, 1,000 of our 7,000 hospitals have closed forever. Most of it's just financial insolvency, mergers and acquisition, but ransoms can absolutely knock you down for more than 4 to 6 weeks and drain you to zero, where you're either close your doors forever, like this Illinois hospital, just, closed, it's gone. No other hospital, you're kind of screwed. Or you get acquired and mothballed and ruined pretty quickly. So if you think this isn't happening much, University of North Carolina does maps, and my wife and I made this animated GIF, but every single one of these dots over time lapse is a hospital that's gone forever. We're not rebuilding them. They're just becoming strip malls or paved. In fact, there are some hospitals that are still open that have bats in them in Florida. The Prospect Health. Yeah. You can, I can tell you later. Yeah. Some are closures, conversions, types. Yes. So back to this idea of what's more important, protecting our confidentiality of our PHI or the availability. HIPAA kills people. When you see the news, and the first thing they say is, in an abundance of caution, in accordance with industry best practices, we've decided to shut down operations to contain the breach. So what they did is they had a confidentiality loss that it's already the horses left the barn. And by choosing to shut down operations to contain the breach, they introduced an availability attack and people die. People have worsened outcomes and they burn through cash flow. So back to this Maslow's idea. I'm not saying HIPAA is a bad idea. I love my privacy. I'd like to be alive to enjoy it. We have to prioritize our emphasis. So on the Maslow's thing, one of the things I introduced in my CISA after action report to the White House, to Congress, to the newly formed ONCD was, when everything's critical, nothing's critical. And if you don't like Maslow's because it's too squishy, what about latency tolerance? What's your downtime tolerance? So I measured the 55 and we racked and stacked them, and there are about a dozen that have a downtime tolerance of 48 hours or less. So these are the ones that had a downtime tolerance that was short. Not only are they atomically important, like provide drinking water, provide medical care, provide electricity, they're interdependent such that you remove any one of those yellow boxes and you can't deliver hospital care. Any one of them interrupts hospital care. And I'm so thrilled to have Dr. Natalie Sullivan going to talk in this room later today about some of those disruptions. And it's worse because when you can't care for those patients, the very workforce and the families you depend upon to provide your drinking water and whatnot happen. In Jackson, Mississippi, during the pandemic, the water and wastewater engineers were sick or dead or moved the coasts, and somebody overpressurized the pipes, old pipes, wooden clay pipes, ground seepage, boil water orders. Women and children couldn't drink water for months, right? I mean, there's stories about if we aren't taking care of our workforce, the critical infrastructure workforce can't take care of us. So this is one of the reasons we funded the pilot with Craig at the Institute for Security and Technology on UnDisruptable. It was a pilot to see, is there any there to look at water, access to emergency care, and if it was good, we're going to also look at food and electricity in more earnest. We wanted to meet people where they are, use creative arts, use empathy. Don't tell them what we know. We want to tell them a little bit of threat context. We want to understand what they know. I didn't use the same language of ethnography and whatnot, but we were basically being humble seekers and partners and using the language they used and their understanding and asking them questions. So when we get to consequences, I'm going to go a little faster because I don't have infinite time. We made a couple of videos. I'm not going to play all of them, but I think I'm going to play the one I meant to play during my panel. So I asked, do you want to see the power one, the emergency care, water, So let's play the healthcare one you haven't seen yet. Come on. Oh, I guess we're not going to play it. Okay. I described it visually. We have it linked in the event page, I guess. So basically the idea is 4.4 minutes is enough to lead to excess deaths for heart. 1 hour to 3 hours is enough for death or worse outcomes for stroke. So if your hospital's down, what's the nearest one? If that one's also down, you may not get care. So we talk about water hammers. A water hammer is a property of physics. Everyone in this room will probably describe water hammer better than I can because most of you are in the water sector. But you probably heard one in your house that's small, but based on the volume and the suddenness of the change, if this is a 12-inch, 24-inch, or 36-inch water main, you can have pretty big burst water mains. But I've also been told overpressurization is bad too. Underpressurization is bad too. So there's different things with physics, the pressure, that can be affected if you're naked on the internet, like Silas Cutler's publication from Census this past week. 400 water facilities had unauthenticated direct access to cyber physical controls, RGB colors, and they helped work with the EPA to contact them and take them offline. So I'm worried about, for example, a water hammer. How did I know about it? Because we used empathy and we met people and we said, hey, you're the plant operator, you're a professional engineer. How could you do damage? And a lot of them said, yeah, I'm worried about water hammers. Not every community, gravity fed is different than pressure in a pump fed. So then we said, let's test some assumptions. Who would do this? Why 2027? Don't we have a military to protect us from warfare? Don't we have insurance? What about mutual assistance? So just a couple things. It could be China in 2027. They said they're going to take Taiwan. They want to stay out of it. We're not going to stay out of it. So they're going to hit us. We know they can hit us because we keep finding them in our water. So right now it's like a sword of Damocles where they're threatening, but not acting, living off the land, so to speak. So that we are very worried about that time frame. That's the primary thrust of this project. But Iran, the cyber avengers, were mad at Israel, and they hacked Israeli-made equipment called Unitronics. In several states, most of the coverage of press was in Pennsylvania, but it was in several states across the US. And the payload was not to brick the devices or to cause a water hammer. The payload was a defacement. Said, basically shame on you for using Israeli equipment. And then Russia, Cyber Army of Russia, born a criminal group, state tolerated, maybe state directed, overflowed tanks in Texas. So it doesn't matter if it's China in 2027. Anyone can reach out and touch our water because we don't have enough participation and support yet. And I'm thrilled to have so many of you here because we're going to build critical mass on helping. So why 2027? Go watch the January 31st, 2024 hearings with Nakasone from outbound NSA, Christopher Wray from FBI, Harry Coker from ONCD, and Jen Easterly from CISA, all pretty much in unison with specific gory details on what we're worried about, why we're worried about it, when we're worried about it. And they're pretty compelling, pretty consistent, but very little follow through since because we go through rhythms in the federal government. Most people think the government will protect us if it's critical infrastructure and they must own it. But no, on almost every one of these lifelines, it's at least 85% are privately owned and operated. And within those 85% that are privately owned and operated, they're mostly target-rich cyber poor or living below what Wendy Nather calls the cyber security poverty line. They don't participate in public-private partnerships. They can't spell cyber. They're not dumb. They're just not at the table. And we haven't really brought them to the table. And even if we did, they're price fixed. They can't do much. Some of them lose money on every gallon of water they provide. So it's not a great situation. We put a lot of dependence on their shoulders, but we haven't equipped them or priced it properly to succeed. We wanted the benefits of connectivity. We haven't paid the price tag for it. So I'm not going to do the full version of this, but it got worse with Executive Order 14239. I'm not chastising the government. It's just a shift in a philosophy that we're going to have the states do more of their own protection. It happened to unfortunately be concurrent with the loss of funding for the multi-state ISAC, which could have been a pivotal transition institution. The sector risk management agencies are the 16 public-private partnerships. Many of them have either been reduced funding or suffered attrition, voluntary and otherwise, through DOGE. So we are weakened even on standalone. CISA, people think CISA is charged with defense, but it's really an inform and advise. I worked there during the pandemic. very important, critical role to scale cyber talent and physical talent across 16 as a horizontal, but it's still finding its footing, and it's recently, had some setbacks. So Congress, even if they passed a law tomorrow, the notice of proposed rulemaking and rollout of that would not affect any meaningful change in the time horizons for which I am concerned. So they can provide support, hearings, education, rhetoric, urgency, and maybe some recovery. But this is really going to fall to us. I don't just mean the people in this room, but people like us. So don't expect them to come save us. The insurance industry is pretty clear when you talk to them. So you really should talk to your insurer. They do not cover acts of war. They all slightly define it differently. These would be acts of war, or at least within the margins. But more importantly, they cannot handle the concurrent capacity. Most of them use someone like a Mandiant or something else. There's only so many of them. So how will they prioritize? Is it their biggest customers, first come, first serve? Is it the trauma center? Or is it like, a gas station with a movie theater? So we don't have a good plan, and I'm working with CyberHackyView to do tabletop crisis simulations. In fact, they have a conference right now, or they would be here. And I'm going to go to their next conference and run a whole day tabletop with them, because we know we don't have good answers to a lot of these questions about concurrency. Speaking of concurrency, mutual aid is when we will send our firefighters or repairmen to different towns that are affected by a natural disaster. But when it's everything, everywhere, all at once, if you ask our good friend Eric Franco in the state of Wisconsin, who does a lot of volunteer coordination for crisis management, incident response for the state of Wisconsin, I said, what's your concurrency capacity? Which means how many can you do at a time? He's like, probably 3. I said, how many counties and towns do you have? He said, more than 3. He's a fantastic resource, and he's part of the cyber civil defense cyber resilience core effort that we've been rolling out. So you can't assume that our peacetime mitigations will scale. They're not useless, but they will not scale. So we really have to be comfortable with that discomfort. You already saw the hammer time video, so I'm not going to play it again this morning, hopefully, if you were here. But when you combine the fact that any hospital outage for any reason means you have to drive further away and might have worse than outcomes, now combine that with the fact that not just ransomware, but water attacks almost everywhere at once means if we're diverting each other to the next nearest town and all the other towns are closed, this is a very, very bad situation. I don't want to take any thunder from Natalie, but even though I thought I knew what she was going to say at CyberMed Summit last year, and she had an additional slide that gave me a heart attack. So then we talk about defense, and this is where I'm a little hard on my friends in the room. It's with love. And that's why I was so happy to hear such a great tone from the DEF CON Franklin volunteer, because when we're holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I started asking, what's the best defense? And no, it's not a good offense. It's not my opinion. I'm a protector. So Jen Easterly would say, is it shields up? Should we cyber up? Should we add cyber? Or maybe it's connections down. Maybe the safest way to win is to not to play the game. If you can't afford to protect it, you can't afford to connect it. There are several towns not yet hyper-connected or overexposed. Maybe we should keep it that way for a little while. Some recently connected. Maybe we should retreat, or at least preserve the opportunity to retreat in manual operations. One of the things that keeps me up at night for real is a lot of my college roommates that are engineers that make pumps for Emerson or whatnot. There are pumps now that have no wheel on them. You can't manually turn them on or off. It's computer driven and internet connected. So there is no manual fallback really. And these are being pushed upon their customers who don't even always want them. So is it shields up, connections down, or some sort of physical mitigations? And what we've come through this empathy and humility is a lot of this for now with the limited time and money we have, and some of the techniques that we heard from our prior speaker, it's going to probably be the latter. So on the hammer time, the best way is not to, hit every cyber nail with a cyber hammer. It's maybe Idaho National Labs consequence informed engineering. It's a subset of a heavy thing called CCE. I love it, but it's heavy. But lightweight piece of this, oversimplified, and I hope Ginger doesn't kill me, because she's going to talk about this tomorrow, is that if you want to reduce the likelihood that you get hacked, you cyber up, you add cyber, which is, I think, what Aspen's doing, I think what Franklin's doing, and we need to do it. We should turn on multi-factor authentication. We should have patchable things. We should do all that good hygiene. We should do the pause take 9. And if you want to say we might fail still, but how do we drive down the consequences? Engineering drives down consequences. So even though I'm a cyber guy, true, I can tell no one has an appetite or a budget for cyber in the time frame of 12 to 18 months. So these might be circuit breakers. The reason your house doesn't catch on fire every time there's a surge is because we throw a circuit breaker inconvenience to pause your availability, not to destroy and burn your house down. So there are water circuit breakers that Gus is going to talk about in his talk in this room later today. And that engineer and that Ginger and the water ISAC and others are going to talk about. There's a great book coming out that AWA is going to publish with West Yost. I love what I'm learning and hearing. I think I'm more optimistic after having met the good colleagues in this water sector than I was before we started this project. I'm still terrified, but I am more optimistic. So prioritization reloaded as I go faster. So let's try this again. What's more important, provide water or provide medical care?
Can't do medical care.
Trick question, right? So you need water to provide medical care, but let's get harder. If you have to restore one, do you provide water for the dialysis center or the trauma center? It's getting really personal, but in my town, they deliberately separated the dialysis centers across town from the hospitals. So they may have to choose. And the time to choose is not during the attack. These are hard equity conversations. What's more important, restoring water for the county that has one and only one hospital, or the third of 3 hospitals? This means it may not be up to your town. The reason I wanted to have Blake here, and Blake's freaking amazing, the happy warrior, is these decisions may be at the regional, the county, or even the state level. For his geography, which is the second largest county in the country, if I recall, state size of New Jersey, he has one trauma center in the middle of Flagstaff area. If that thing goes down, there's nothing nearby. So that trauma center is the most important for his geography. So these are hard questions, and no one should be surprised or blindsided by these attacks if we do our job right. So which is more important, removing exposure, adding cyber, engineering down consequences? I think it's going to depend. First hospital guy I met when we started before CyberMed Summit, he said, well, you know, Josh, if you've seen one hospital, you've seen one hospital. Like, he was trying to say that they're all beautiful and snowflakes. There are some things that are transferable, but we can't assume one size fits all. So this humility has to extend. We're going to have playbooks, but we're going to have several playbooks. We hope these on the ground, roll our sleeves up, create options that can then be scaled. We're going to innovate narrowly, replicate widely. Okay, so back to the needs of the many. I'm going to probably brush past this a little bit. I want to give them some grace and pressure relief. It's not necessarily their fault that our priorities are wrong. And the reason I did so is before ransomware, attackers and defenders focused on the Fortune 100, Fortune 1000. Why? Well, why do you rob banks? They asked Willie Sutton, famous bank robber. Anybody know the answer? That's where the money is. So why did we defend the Fortune 1000? Because attackers and defenders could monetize the Fortune 1000. Ransomware was not a technological revolution. It's boring. I love the ransomware task force, but it's not necessarily sexy. It was not a technological revolution. It was a financial revolution. What they figured out is that the unavailability, not the confidentiality, the unavailability of anyone can be monetized. The problem is defenders have still not 6-7 years later figured out how to monetize the cyber poor. So it's an unmitigated feeding frenzy. So the incentives, the economic incentives are wrong. And that's why I'm so worried about water. So remember this poverty line, this horizontal line at the top of the pyramid, because we're going to use it again. I'm looking directly at some of my colleagues that know I'm saying this with love, but the target rich cyber poor was the term I used in the government because a lot of the Republicans during my time at CISA did not like the notion of poverty, and it just became more partisan-ish language. So this is just a slight, bipartisan reframing of it. What we said is if they can't just do best practices or just do zero trust or just join an ISAC or just do the CPGs, what can they do? So we didn't say do best practices. We wrote 3 bad practices, the most dangerous 3 things. It's things like the use of unsupported end-of-life operating systems is in critical infrastructure is dangerous, especially so when internet facing. Use of known fixed hard-coded passwords is dangerous. Then we said get your shit off Shodan, but I couldn't say shit or Shodan. So I said get your stuff off search. Your assets are showing. That turned into a rallying cry to get on the free vulnerability scanning. They were getting a nightly report of too many vulnerabilities. They were overwhelmed. So we said, don't fix everything, just fix the KEVs, which wasn't a common term, but that's the known exploited vulnerabilities. So we're literally looking at, with no staff and no budget, what can be done to buy down risk and turn into the CPGs and other things like that. But back to your pyramids, the three I'm most upset about, most concerned about, that are most neglected by a lot of the public-private partnerships historically. Financial services is head and shoulders the best of these, but it's in part because they have a lot of money. They got hit a lot by financial crime. They have a lot of senior executive support. Like, someone asked Jamie Dimon from Morgan Stanley, how much do you spend, or what percentage of your IT spend do you spend on security? And his answer was, as much as we have to. It's not like, oh, you got to align to the business. He knows that the cost of doing business in his field is variable, and they spend what they have to accomplish their mission. Every other sector is still 20 years behind for the most part. There's a couple in the middle, but when I look at the ones that are most important that we prioritize already, water, food, access to emergency care, they too have poverty lines. And the participation is not to scale, but there's only a small percentage in water. We want to fix that. We want to help that. You offered free membership in the Water Ice Act to the National Rural Water Association, the really tiny ones. They don't yet know how to consume it, but we're trying. We're going to figure it out. We're doing the right things. We have to go faster. With emergency care, of the 6,000 remaining hospitals, I told you we had 7,000. We're down to, I think there's about 300 in the ISAC. It's one of the better ISACs. They're doing their annual exercise in 2 weeks down here, and I'm going to help surprise them with some water. They don't know it yet. And then the energy sector has public-private partnerships. The CEOs show up to their sector coordinating councils. That's pretty cool. They have Edison Electric for the bigs and NRECA for the littles. Like, I think they could teach us some things if we want to collaborate. So I can't chase every single one of these. We're not going to go from 650 to full participation. It's not going to happen. Not in the time frame we want. Maybe not ever. But I said, this is ugly, but I said, what's the nexus and the simplicity here? Let's just focus on the 6,000 towns that have a hospital. Let's not focus on the entire town. Let's focus on the pressure zones that service the hospital's continuity of operations. And then we crafted a pitch to Craig Newmark Philanthropies on how we might innovate directly with a dozen on the ground, record everything, capture empathy, capture nouns and verbs, have these people be our co-creators and heroes of their own story. And then the best ambassadors as possible to the other towns will be people that sound and talk like them and live their life. And we're going to do this together. So a lot of storytelling, a lot of narrative, a lot of translation, a lot of grace, a lot of helping hand instead of pointing finger. And we're going to try to do that. Once we have those playbooks, every town can use them, whether they have a hospital or not. So we want to find the low-hanging fruit with consequence-informed engineering. So I'm pretty close to out of time, but I wanted to bathe you in some of this. Again, the project is not the entire pyramid, not all 16 sectors, not all 55 functions, just the handful at the bottom that keep people alive. But even further, since this was before the proposal, we're really just going to say it has to be a hospital town. We're going to help you with the water dependencies because that's the weakest link. And we're going to help you with cyber-informed engineering initially. Once we've got those things taken off, I want to introduce them to DEF CON Franklin. I want to introduce them to the Aspen Water Project. I want to introduce them to the Cleveland Clinic, the CLTC clinics across the country. I want to have them connected with the free tools from GRC. I want to have them understand best practices from the ransomware task force. We want to make sure that if they take a punch, if a punch is thrown, they could take a punch, and then we will be the advertisement for crawl, walk, run for the rest of these good efforts. Our general approach has been to meet people where they are for owners and operators 6 months before we go to the town leadership. So they have their time to go through their weeping, gnashing of teeth and the stages of grief, but they have a chance to be the hero in their own story. Then we go to the municipal leadership for 3 to 6 months. And then we may go to everyday Americans by partnering with the Wondros team and the folks behind Pause Take 9 so that we can have a bit different language for everyday Americans. So everybody can play a part. We want no community blindsided. But we could use help on these ground games, exploration, creative arts capture, et cetera. What I was asking RSA to do is slightly different than what I'm asking you to do. Part of the idea when we started the cavalry 13 years ago is the cavalry isn't coming. So you can either be depressed or you could step up. And I was hoping people would step up. Same thing happens here. The general idea always was that we're over dependent on undependable things. We're going to eventually right size that. We're probably going to have software liability finally, probably. But not, they say that the public policy is written in blood because we always wait too long. And we're going to have some losses. I think our choices and our actions in the next 12, 18 to 24 months can reduce how many losses we have. So I'm asking you to help. And then the 3-tiered idea here is for hackers or technologists. The first thing you should do is make sure your household, your town or your county, if you're worried about your family. So do you have a continuity of water plan? Do you have life straws, water barrels, iodine tablets? I'm not asking you to be a prepper. Be prepared enough that you aren't a drain on your community for 3 weeks or so. The UK government's asked their citizens to have 3 weeks of water resilience. They haven't said why, but you know why. This room knows why. So I want to make sure that you can handle your household. When you're not worried about your household, we're going to equip you with questions you can ask your town leadership and offers you can do lawfully. The reason where's Michael? Michael did a great survey of the laws in different states for Good Samaritan, or if it's under National Guard Authority or this, that. Grace Mena and Sarah Powachek and Ann Cleveland have been organizing the volunteers. So we're going to kind of make sure you know that wherever you live, how to not be on the wrong side of things, how to be truly helpful. So these are being formed as we're doing this project. We have a lot of teammates. And then it's unlike many things where it's top down enforced and regulated and poorly and slowly ruled out, this is going to be very federated. And you can at least protect your own town or at least experiment, and you can feed back in. And we do a lot more communication and note sharing about what's working and what's not working. So perhaps we can do more with DEFCON Franklin on that front. This is the Cyber Resilience Core slide that the CLTC gave me. They were in a bunch of stuff yesterday. We're still forming this. It's got phases. I wish we had started maybe a year earlier for the purposes of this project, but we're pushing as hard as we can. They're taking the advice and the requirements as best they can. But we're going to have to build this airplane while we're taking it off without embarrassing too much. We made new stickers, but then this was before this latest round of funding. So now you have the Water Hammer stickers as well. But this could not be done without the generosity of Greg Newmark, Lethbridge. Can't be done. I'd like the government to do more. I'd like other civil society to do more. I'd like federal grants to do more. They're not going to come. So people in this room or nobody. So that was the general calls of the RSA crowd, but they're focused on mostly IT and mostly their employer. And I was trying to get them to come out of their shell a little bit more and take care of their family. I'm preaching a little bit more to the choir here, but now that we are doing this, many of the speakers you're seeing here are going to come to the cavalry track at B-Sides Las Vegas, where we do a 2.5-day undisruptable flow. And we're going to be doing train the trainers with people like Consequence Support Engineering. Like you're going to see a preview of that from Ginger. You're going to see a little bit of that from Gus because he applies it as a fan and a practitioner. So that's it for this refresh reminder based on some changes I decided this morning. I don't think I want to cut any further into the next speaker, so I'll be in the room. But thank you for your time.